On June 14, 1962, Boston was buzzing with excitement as residents celebrated the homecoming of Alan Shepard, America's first astronaut to venture into space. But that same day, a chilling discovery cast a dark shadow over the city. Police uncovered the tragic death of 56-year-old Anna E. Sleezers, a single mother, whose body was found by her son when he arrived to pick her up for church. Upon entering her bathroom, he discovered Anna's body in the bathtub, with the cord of her dress wrapped tightly around her neck. Forensic evidence revealed a disturbing sequence. Anna had been assaulted, severely beaten, and then strangled. Despite the apparent chaos, with furniture strewn about as if in a robbery, valuables like gold coins and jewelry remained untouched. Oddly, the record player was still on, though the speakers had been switched off. The police initially speculated it was a botched robbery, yet they noted that Anna had few connections outside her close bond with her son. Less than 3 weeks later, on June 28, 1962, tragedy struck again when 85-year-old Mary Mullen was found dead in her home. An autopsy revealed that Mullen had died of a heart attack. Just 2 days afterward, another unsettling discovery was made in Boston's Brighton neighborhood, the body of 68-year-old Nina Nichols. Once again, the scene appeared staged to resemble a robbery, yet valuable silver items were left untouched, leaving detectives puzzled. Nichols was found undressed, her legs positioned apart with her socks tied in a bow, a chilling detail. Investigators believed that the perpetrator had knowledge of Ms. Nichols' personal information, adding to the growing complexity of the case. That same day, a second body was found in the nearby suburb of Lynn, a few miles north of Boston. The victim, 65-year-old Helen Blake, a divorcee, had been subjected to particularly violent injuries, including severe trauma to her genital area. Disturbingly, her bra was tied around her neck in a bow, echoing a detail seen in earlier cases. As before, the scene was arranged to suggest a burglary, but the specifics hinted at something far more sinister. Following this brutal murder, it became clear that Boston was facing a serial killer. In response to the growing threat, Police Commissioner Edmund McNamara cancelled all police leave, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. A public warning was issued, advising women across Boston to lock their doors and remain vigilant around strangers. The terror in Boston escalated quickly. On August 19th, a fifth murder brought the city's fears to a breaking point. In the quiet halls of Seven Grove Garden in the West End, 75-year-old widow Ida Erger was found lifeless in her home. The grim scene was both disturbing and bizarre. Ida's torn nightdress lay disheveled, and her body was posed with legs awkwardly spread across 2 chairs, a cushion oddly placed beneath her. Strangulation had claimed her life, but the lack of any signs of forced entry deepened the mystery. Just hours later, the horror compounded. At 435 Columbia Road in Dorchester, authorities discovered the body of 65-year-old nurse Jane Sullivan, hidden in her own bathroom. Investigators determined she had been dead for a week, killed by her own nylons, which were tightly knotted around her neck. The eerie pattern between these 2 murders left the city reeling and authorities scrambling, as they faced a killer whose methods were as unpredictable as they were horrifying. Boston was thrust back into fear as the notorious Strangler returned, claiming 2 more lives and, this time, targeting younger women. On December 5, 1962, Sophie Clark, a 21-year-old black student known for her cautious demeanor, became the killer's next victim. Despite her vigilance, she met a tragic end, not far from the site of the first victim's murder. Sophie's nude body was found bearing signs of assault, and she had been strangled with her own stockings. In a disturbing escalation, the killer left traces of semen on her body, a chilling indication of growing violence in his methods. Although Sophie's young age set her apart from previous victims, the disturbing similarities in the Strangler's actions left little doubt about his involvement. A neighbor's report of a suspicious man posing as a painter seemed to offer the first real lead, a thin thread of hope in the relentless search for the elusive killer. Just 3 weeks later, tragedy struck again. This time it was Patricia Bissett, a 23-year-old expectant mother, who fell victim. Her employer discovered her body, lying in her apartment in a scene too horrific to describe. Like Sophie, Patricia had been assaulted and strangled with her own stockings, her life and future stolen by a merciless hand. As Boston recoiled in terror and law enforcement scrambled for answers, investigators pursued every lead and scrutinized any potential connection. Yet the Strangler's identity remained an enigma. 2 months after the Board of Investigation was established, Massachusetts Governor Peabody offered a $10,000 reward for information that could help solve the Boston Strangler case. But after the murder of Mary Sullivan, the Strangler seemed to vanish. Then, in October of that year, a chilling incident reignited fears. A criminal broke into a woman's apartment, held a knife to her neck, and used her clothes to tie her to the bed rails. Though he touched her inappropriately, he ultimately asked her how to leave the building, apologizing before escaping and instructing her to stay silent for 10 minutes. Because she wasn't blindfolded, the victim had a clear memory of her attacker's face. Her description sparked recognition among detectives, reminding them of Albert DeSalvo. As his photo circulated across the country, Connecticut police reached out, reporting they were also pursuing a sex offender known as the Man in Blue, named for his attire during his attacks. This new connection finally offered a promising lead in the quest to unmask the Boston Strangler. DeSalvo was apprehended in order to identify the victims of the Man in Blue. Before we delve deeper into the case, it's important to examine the early life of Albert DeSalvo. Born on September 3, 1931 in Chelsea, Massachusetts, DeSalvo was the son of Frank and Charlotte DeSalvo. His father was a violent alcoholic who subjected his family to severe abuse. In one horrifying incident, he knocked out his wife's teeth and broke her fingers in front of their children. Frank would often bring home prostitutes and engage in sexual acts with them, all while his wife and young children looked on. From a young age, DeSalvo displayed troubling behavior, starting with the torture of animals. By his early teens, he began shoplifting and getting into trouble with the law. In November 1943, at just 12 years old, he was arrested for battery and robbery. A month later, he was sent to the Lyman School for Boys. In October 1944, he was paroled and found work as a delivery boy. However, in August 1946, at nearly 15, he was returned to the Lyman School after being convicted of stealing a car. After serving his time, DeSalvo joined the U.S. Army. He completed his first tour of duty with an honorable discharge. He later re-enlisted, but his time in the military was marked by legal troubles, including a court-martial, yet he managed to receive another honorable discharge. DeSalvo served as a military police sergeant with the 2nd Squadron, 14th Armored Cavalry Regiment, during his time in the Army. Albert DeSalvo was arrested and confessed to breaking into approximately 400 homes and assaulting around 300 women across 4 states. Despite his shocking claims, police were skeptical and sent him to Bridgewater Hospital for a mental evaluation. While there, he became friends with fellow inmate George Nassar, who was also facing murder charges. In March 1965, DeSalvo confessed to being the Boston Strangler. He and Nassar discussed the $10,000 reward for information about the case, calculating that they could share $110,000 if both pleaded guilty for the 11 victims. DeSalvo, resigned to spending his life in prison, wanted to ensure his family would be financially secure. Nassar, who was intelligent, believed they could avoid the death penalty by convincing authorities that he was mentally ill. DeSalvo's confession reached lawyer F. Lee Bailey, who represented Nassar. In a recorded conversation, DeSalvo claimed responsibility for the murders of 13 women, including one who died of a heart attack. His wife was skeptical, suggesting he might be seeking media attention. The tape was given to the police, leading to further interrogations and a thorough investigation. By September 1965, the investigation had compiled about 2,000 pages of documentation, confirming initial suspicions of DeSalvo's involvement in the Strangler cases. The investigation concluded that Albert DeSalvo was the Boston Strangler, but many, including lawyers, journalists, and police, doubted his guilt, viewing him as merely a petty thief. No witnesses linked DeSalvo to the murder scenes, despite his recognizable features. In January 1967, DeSalvo was sentenced to life in prison for sexual assault, burglary, and robbery, unrelated to the Strangler case. In November 1973, he sought a meeting with his doctor, claiming to have vital information about the murders, but was stabbed to death in prison the night before. Officials attributed his murder to drug trafficking, though some speculated it was to silence him permanently. Debate continues over DeSalvo's guilt. Those close to him, including his brother, questioned his confession, asserting that he wouldn't have killed anyone. Decades after the series of murders attributed to the Boston Strangler, the pain endured by the families of the victims, particularly Mary Sullivan, the final victim, persisted. Their longing for truth and closure led both DeSalvo's family and Sullivan's nephew to advocate for authorities to reopen the case, hoping modern forensic technology could uncover the truth obscured by uncertainty. In July 2013, a forensic analysis revealed a familial match between preserved DNA evidence from the crime scene and a nephew of DeSalvo. This prompted the exhumation of DeSalvo's body for further testing, which confirmed that the semen found at the scene belonged to him. The infamous case has inspired numerous adaptations in film and literature, including the 1968 movie The Boston Strangler, featuring Tony Curtis as DeSalvo, and Susan Kelly's book The Boston Stranglers, published in 1995. In March 2023, Hulu released Boston Strangler, a film centered on two investigative journalists portrayed by Keira Knightley and Carrie Coon, further cementing the case's enduring impact on popular culture.